What's going on, everyone? Darkside Phil here, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series. This is the series where I basically give my completely honest and what I feel are fair and balanced opinions about games, because what I do when I review games is I compare them to all the other games that I have played recently or even over the past several years, and I try to score them appropriately on a 1 to 10 scale. What I want to do for this particular episode, actually I was trying to think, like, what could be a really cool way to describe the series, because a lot of people, when they hear about my Hateful Truth game reviews, they know that they're different because they've seen them, but what about someone who's never seen one before? So I come up with this slogan. I don't know if anyone, what you think about it, but let me know, obviously, in the comments in this video. Maximum truth, minimum editing. The Hateful Truth video game review series. Because, as you know, I don't do really any editing on these videos, besides maybe putting a logo or something in the corner. So anyway, today we're going to talk about the very first retail game of 2012 that I am reviewing, and I'm excited to do it because I haven't done a Hateful Truth in a while. But it's one of those games where, similar to some other games that I've played, which I'll probably bring up, the premise of the game is excellent. It's something kind of original, or something you don't see all the time. Maybe you've seen it a couple times implemented in a game, but it's not common that you see this all the time. And has massive potential to be something really interesting and unique and fun and different. But then, when it comes to execution, the game falls flat on its face. And one of the games that I've classically said this was a problem with was Epic Mickey, back from 2010, where, wow, this epic story, bringing characters from all of the Disney universe from the past, 100 years, and literally that's how many how long the time span of that game lasted. Bring them into new environments, an open world game with platforming with Mickey in a 3D world. I mean, how often have we never seen something like that? And it had a really massive potential to be great, but then when the game actually came out, anyone who wasn't like a small kid, was very disappointed with this game, realizing that it was pretty much the graphics were bad in a lot of places, with a low, choppy frame rate. The controls were awful. The camera was awful. There was so much repetition in the game, going back and forth to certain things, that the game's execution was shitty. So we have another one of these cases today, and I'm kind of really disappointed because, as you know, I'm a big fan of new IPs, which, new games, new game series, that game studios are taking risks trying to push these new IPs out to the public, rather than just having sequelitis. Modern Warfare 7, Final Fantasy 422, this sequelitis is a major problem right now in the gaming industry, and people, unfortunately, are being a lot more reluctant to jump onto a new game or a new IP because they know for a fact they're going to get a bang for their buck if you buy a sequel. You know what to expect from a sequel, as opposed to you're not sure what to expect from a new IP. Well, Konami and Rebellion Studios have come out with a game with the premise that you cannot die. This is a video game where you literally cannot die. And you say to yourself, wow, that's interesting. What kind of mechanics could they take out of that? Well, imagine if you could rip your head off, roll it through a vent, it would pop on the other side, you could regenerate your body and open a door so that your teammate could go through. Imagine being able to rip off your own arm and throw it and use it as a grenade. It explodes, killing a bunch of enemies. And then you can regenerate that arm. Well, that is actually pretty much the premise of NeverDead, okay? NeverDead is a game where you play Bryce Boltzmann, who is a demon hunter working for an FBI-like agency that apparently is part of the U.S. government. And you have a partner, Arcadia, and you go around hunting demons as they show up at residential areas in the city, at different places where they just basically don't belong. And Bryce is immortal. Due to a curse hundreds of years ago, he can't die. And so, really, the game is about you running around, killing as many demons as you can, protecting your AI partner, Arcadia, while killing as many enemies as you can, solving puzzles, and basically putting up with a lot of adult-style humor, because there is a lot of sex jokes, there's a lot of alcohol references, there's a lot of different things in this game, very similar to the new IP from last year, Shadows of the Damned, also from Konami, where it was a more adult-oriented game. It was like adult humor, adult comedy. Now, NeverDead, unfortunately, NeverDead does not really deliver as a gaming experience, okay? Now keep in mind, what I'm going to review in this video, and I know sometimes, when I do my Hateful Truth reviews, I try to do a complete review of the entire game, okay? Meaning a single player experience, if there's any multiplayer, all that as a whole. Well, the problem with NeverDead is that the game before it was released got critically panned by the game industry, the gaming media like IGN, who got the game in advanced copies, and basically almost nobody bought this game, okay? And because almost nobody bought this game, you can't find a match online. It's supposed to have online challenges and online multiplayer for up to 4 players. I looked online last night after I beat the game, and this afternoon, I can't find anyone. Every time I search, it says there are no matches online. So unfortunately, I can't review the multiplayer because no one's playing it. I don't think anyone is still playing this game, or maybe just really nobody really bought it. So in that way, unfortunately, I can't factor the multiplayer into my review. So understand that this review will be only of the single player portion of the game. At its core, what NeverDead really is, it seems like a combination of maybe Devil May Cry with maybe God of War, some similar different things like that, those style of, beat 'em up, not beat 'em up, but, action adventure combat style games. And that being said, you're going to have a variety of guns to use in this game. You'll have handguns, you'll have assault rifles, SMGs, shotguns, grenade launchers, and the like. You'll also have a sword, which you can use for melee combat. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, that sounds good. Sounds like there's going to be a wide variety of combat in this game. Not really. The combat pretty much comes down to, if you're using guns, just fucking shooting straight ahead at whatever's in the target, reticles or reticules, however you pronounce it, I forget. And that's it. There's really no complexity to it. It's not like the weapons operate any differently besides maybe the grenade launcher, because it's a slow, powerful weapon, but you just fucking blast whatever's in front of you. Melee combat is probably some of the most simplistic, boring, annoying combat I've ever seen in my entire life. What you have to do when you're doing melee combat is you hold the trigger of the controller, left trigger, which puts you into a melee combat mode, and then you take the right thumbstick and you waggle it left and right or up and down. This is the extent of the melee combat of NeverDead. There's no combos, there's no advanced melee attacks, there's no complexity to anything. You just fucking do this, and you can kill pretty much almost every enemy in the game just doing that, okay? That being said, even though there are guns and swords, at the beginning of the game, the guns are highly ineffective. They pretty much, at the base damage level that they give you for the guns, almost do no damage to most of the enemies in the game. So at the early stages of the game, you just end up doing this for the majority of the stages, killing everything in sight, rather than actually bothering with the guns. Now, as you progress in the game, you'll find experience power-ups throughout the stages. There's collectibles that give you big experience bonuses, and as you kill enemies, you gain experience points. And then during the course of the game, you will unlock upgrade abilities. Now, what these are will actually enhance your attack. So you may be able to upgrade the damage of your guns. You may be able to have a wider arc on your swings with your sword. You can also have faster health regeneration. You can also unlock the ability to actually rip off your own arm and throw it and turn it into a grenade. So there's all kinds of different abilities that you can unlock over the course of the game. But there's a problem. The problem is they give you a certain amount of points per se that you can equip for abilities, and each ability takes up a certain number of points. So you might do damage upgrade, which takes up 2 points, sword upgrade, which takes up 3 points, and so you equip 4 upgrades, and now you're maxed out. You can't equip any more. Well, unfortunately, over the course of your first playthrough of the game only offers you to add 3 more points to your abilities, and what it equates to is you can only equip maybe 5, 6 abilities tops. And so some of the abilities later on in the game that you would get, such as, oh, really big damage boost on the guns, well, if you do that, you're probably not going to be able to equip the upgrade that has the faster health regeneration, which is really helpful, the upgrade that allows you to use your arm as a grenade, which is really helpful, or the upgrade that lets you upgrade your sword. So you really have to pick and choose carefully what upgrade you want, and it really takes away the fun of the game. If the game allowed you to equip, say, 10 really strong upgrades by the end of the game, it probably would have been a much better experience, but it so limits you with what you can equip for your abilities. It's very frustrating and it's very limiting, and you're going to find that there's probably 40 abilities by the end of the game that you could possibly buy, and you're only going to use maybe 10 of them max over the course of the game because of this limitation. I don't really understand what they were going for there. So, the whole immortal thing, really, at its core, it's a gimmick. In some parts of the game it's used really well, and in other parts it's horrible. So let me explain. It's really ingenious when you have to have a puzzle where you have to roll your head through something and open something from the other side, or the fact that you can't die, and so there are some parts of the game where you can jump off super high ledges and fall, and your body will like explode, all your limbs will fall off, and then you roll around collecting them all, and then you're whole again. That kind of stuff's really cool. The problem with the gameplay is that, number one, first of all, you're not immortal. You can actually die in the game, which makes no sense. The whole premise of the game is that you couldn't die. So why can you die? I don't understand that. So how do you die in the game? Well, what happens is eventually, if you get hit by a heavy hit, or if you get snuck attack, or something will cause your head to fall off your body, okay? And if your head is off of your body, there are these enemies literally in every fucking room of the game. I shit you not. There is not one time in the game when you're fighting enemies that this one enemy type is not present, and it's called like a grandbaby or something like that. And what it is, it's a little ball with tentacles and a baby head stuck in it, and it rolls around the ground. And if your head, your decapitated head is on the ground, these will try to suck your head in like a vacuum. If it succeeds at sucking your head in, you then have to do a quick time event where there's a bar at the bottom of your screen going left and right. It's like a little yellow area on this bar moving, and then you have a cursor that's moving as well. And you have to do a button press perfectly when that is pointing to the yellow, and if you do, the baby head explodes, your head is cleared out, and then you're free to continue playing the game. If you fuck up, the game is over. It's not like you lose a life, the game is over, and then you have to restart from whatever the previous checkpoint was. Now, in most cases, it's not a big deal because the previous checkpoint maybe was a minute or two before, but it's really fucking frustrating if you're at a multi-stage boss battle and a stupid baby head sucks you up out of nowhere, and then you're frustrated because you're in a tense boss battle, you're all nervous or whatever, and you're, oh, okay, here we go, quick time, oh fuck, I missed it. You have to start the boss battle over. What the fuck was that? Were they thinking when they did that? A game with the premise that you can't die, and you can actually die by just fucking up one single QuickTime event. It's ridiculous. It's a horrible way to explain how you die in this game. It's fucking stupid, and it shouldn't be in the game, in my opinion. Okay. Now, that being said, okay, is that the only frustrating thing with this game? No, and it really is frustrating because there are a lot of things that I liked about NeverDead that ended up being squandered and wasted because the gameplay execution was so poor, and let me explain why. I mean, the whole idea of a demon hunter who can't die, going around, you know, New York City or wherever it takes place, it's never really explained, but going around killing demons and monsters, seeking out someone who actually cursed him 500 years ago, finally, you know, challenging him at the end of the game, it seems like an interesting premise, especially with the adult humor. He's kind of like, Bryce is kind of like a combination of Duke Nukem with maybe a Dante. He's kind of like a unique combination of all these different characters. And there's constant flashbacks to his past of how he originally got cursed and became immortal, and the graphical design of the game is really impressive. I thought that the graphics were really well done. The music, there's actually licensed music here from Megadeth in this game. They actually made the title track of the game, NeverDead. So you're like, wow, it's like the production values for the game, they really did put a lot of effort into the production of the game, but then when it came to the execution of the gameplay, that development team just completely fucked up. And I don't know how you can make a game with one side is so well done and the other side is so fucking horrible and then put it out like that. So what about NeverDead is it that I don't like? Well, first of all, the whole decapitation, lose your limb gameplay is extremely frustrating because it's not done in a way that is fun for the gamer. So let me explain. Sure, it is fun to rip off your own arm, throw it at an enemy and have it blow up. Cool. But the majority of the time, the reason your limbs will be falling off is because an enemy hit you. Now, at the beginning of the game, it might not be so frustrating because the enemy hit you, uh-oh, I lost my arm. Okay, I roll over it and I get it back, now I can fight again. Okay, that's cool. But as you advance in the game, you're going to find out that the slightest touch from any enemy will knock off multiple limbs, if not everything, including your fucking head. So you'll be in the middle of a heated battle, one enemy hits you from behind because you can't even see them. Now you have to spend 20 seconds rolling around the ground trying to get all your limbs back before the baby suck them up and eat them, or sucks up your head and makes you actually end the game or lose the game. Or you can roll to one of these things that is, it looks like a snake in a vase or a jar, and those will allow you to actually regenerate all of your limbs instantly. So that's cool. But the problem is the game just entirely too much makes your limbs fall off at the slightest little thing. There are boss battles where the boss battle could take 2 minutes if your fucking limbs wouldn't go flying all over the place every 2 seconds, and it's really annoying. It's so silly that this guy is supposed to be this really tough immortal guy, and the guy walks up and goes, dip, and his head fucking rips off and flies 400 feet to the right. It's like, what the fuck? Even the most trivial menial enemy in the game couldn't be the most annoying fucking thing because you can't keep your limbs attached to your body. I think the guy is actually made of paper mache and fucking cardboard. If his limbs are able to just pop off so often, it makes no fucking sense. So I kind of understand why they did it. They probably were like, oh, well, if this doesn't happen too often, then the game's going to be way too easy, but the gameplay is just downright fucking annoying because your limbs come off entirely too much. You will spend more time recollecting your limbs or trying to regenerate your limbs rather than actually enjoying the gameplay of the game, and that's one of the #1 frustrations with the game. Another frustration about the game, the enemy types. There just aren't enough. I can tell you right now, on one hand, I could probably count the majority of the enemies in the game. The babies, these little guys that look like dogs, and there are 3 different types of that, but they're still all the same type of enemy. Flying enemies, enemies that walk on like tripod legs, and there are a couple different varieties, like ones with blades on their heads or ones with guns on their heads, but they're still the same kind of enemy. And, wow, except for boss characters, I think I did just cover all the enemies in the game. 4. There's 4 enemy types in the game. And you will have parts of the game where you will be, oh, I take it back, there's 5. I just remembered, there is a type of enemy that rolls around on a wheel. So there are 5 types of enemies. And it's frustrating because majority of the gameplay of this game is you shooting them or slashing, like I said, the repetitive slash, and there's nothing else to it. There's no complexity to the combat, like I said. There's no advanced combos. In fact, there's no combos at all. There's no special attacks. There's no quick time events. There's nothing like that at all. It's just shoot, or slash, and that's it. And some enemies will make you slash, some enemies will make you shoot, some you could do both to, some, you know, there is one other enemy type that's kind of like almost a mini boss type. He has a shield, and you have to wait for him to move his shield out of the way before you shoot him in the chest. But besides that, there's really no complexity to the gameplay here. Very basic, very few enemies. Now, there are some pretty cool bosses in the game, and I would say that the bosses are probably some of the more interesting things in the game, even though they're just pattern bosses like you've had in previous combat games like this, action-style games. Once you learn the pattern, the boss is really easy to beat. So, not a very big deal. My one major gripe, and this really only applies to the beginning of the game when you're trying to learn the game itself, is that the game does an absolutely atrocious job of teaching you the basics of the game. And let me give you an example, and then I'm going to give you an analogy, because I think it's a perfect analogy for what happens, okay? Imagine that you're in a math class. You're sitting in a math class at a school, and a teacher, right at the beginning of the class, literally like 10 minutes into the class, turns on the board and writes an equation, okay? Doesn't say a word about what the equation is, doesn't say when you'll use it, just draws an equation on the board. Here's an equation. Then they erase the equation, okay? 45 minutes later, that teacher hands you a test and says you must pass this test on the spot today, or you fail. So they hand you this test. And you're looking at the test, you're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't remember ever being in this situation or having any way to explain how to solve this test. But you have to do it. Well, guess what? You needed to use the equation that that teacher wrote on the board 45 minutes prior, but never explained to you how to use it, never gave you an example of how to use it. You need to do it. Use that equation to solve this test, okay? So, with that analogy, how many of you, including myself, how many of you do you think would have passed that test? I wouldn't have. I would have fucking flunked the test. Let's be honest. So, guess what? That is exactly what happens in NeverDead. About 20 minutes into the gameplay, not even, probably about 15 minutes, as you're doing other things, the game will start giving you random tutorial tips on how to do stuff. And one of them is, when your head is decapitated, when your meter is fully charged, push in left thumbstick to regenerate your body. And what that means is your entire body will grow out of just your head. But it tells you this while you're doing combat, while you're doing a puzzle. So at that point, you're like, you wouldn't understand what exactly they're explaining. This isn't the right time to give you a tip about that. It would be like when you're tying your shoe and someone all of a sudden starts to explain to you, I don't know how to cook dinner. And you're like, well, I'm trying my fucking shoe. Why are you giving me the ingredients to dinner right now? 45 minutes later, there's a part in the game, in the first stage of the game, where you're decapitated and all of a sudden the room fills up with monsters and you can't fight the monsters because you're a decapitated head. Well, you're supposed to remember that tooltip from 45 minutes earlier when you were being distracted by combat and puzzles to push in the left thumbstick and regenerate your body so you can fight these monsters. Horrible. Horrible execution on a tutorial of how to play the game. If you're going to have tutorial tips, put them on the fucking screen at the appropriate times for the first time you need to use those functions. Why are you telling me 45 minutes prior to the first time that I need to use this ability, how to use the ability? It makes no fucking sense. Similar to that, in the entire first stage of the game, there are those pots, like I told you, with the snakes coming out of them. In the entire first stage of the game never explains what those pots are. So you are going on like, what the fuck is this? I don't know what this does. Am I supposed to shoot it? You'll try shooting it. You'll try hitting it with the sword. You'll jump on it. You'll take a shit and piss on it. You'll fucking throw up all over it. You'll fucking do armpit farts on it. And you'll never figure out what the fuck it is. It's not until the beginning of the second part of the game, Chapter 2, that the game tells you what they are. So why the fuck are they in the first part of the game if the instruction manual of the game and the game itself don't tell you what they are? What were they thinking? It's just the horrible tutorial tips in the game. They're horribly timed. But luckily, once you beat the first couple chapters of the game, it's not a problem anymore because you already know all the abilities of the game. And then finally, my final gripe with the game, the final boss fight, one of the most annoying boss fights I've probably had in the past decade. Definitely one of the most annoying boss fights since I've been playing games on YouTube, simply because there is one portion of the boss fight that doesn't explain what you're supposed to do, while the other parts do explain. So there is a part of the boss fight that says, attack this part, shoot through this one thing to hit the boss. Okay. Then all of a sudden you're supposed to know you're supposed to draw your sword, swing it through a certain area to charge the sword, and then attack a certain part of the boss. Never explain. So I spent 20 minutes fighting this boss trying to figure out, like, damn, I'm really not doing much damage to him. I must be doing something wrong. What am I doing? And finally, through trial and error, I figure it out. Why the fuck can't you just explain? Again, horrible tutorial tips. Explain to me what I'm supposed to be doing. And it doesn't help that this boss fight is multiple stages where little repetitive enemies keep coming out at you. You have to kill them to even get a chance to attack the boss again. You have a limited time to attack the boss. Oh, and by the way, during this entire boss fight, the boss might do a ground pound attack that if you don't jump at the perfect time, your entire body becomes dismembered. I mean, your head, your arms, your legs fly away, and now you have to spend 30 seconds to a minute either gathering all the limbs again or regenerating yourself, and it's a complete time waster. So one of the most frustrating final boss fights in a game in quite some time, really annoying. So it pisses me off because, like I said, there are a lot of parts of NeverDead that I really enjoy. I actually enjoy the story, I enjoy the characters, I like the premise, the design, all of that, the writing of the game, the design, the art direction of the game, I really enjoy. But the gameplay is fucking awful. One last note, there are points in this game when the frame rate also drops ridiculously, like below 30 frames per second. And for an action game where you're supposed to be reacting to things going on the screen, having a low frame rate is unacceptable. So if they knew that the frame rate was going to be low, maybe they should have dumbed down the graphics a little bit. The graphics are great, but to have a frame rate at critical times that's dropping into the toilet is unacceptable in 2012. So NeverDead is a very mixed bag. If you like interesting stories, interesting characters, a cool graphical design, and hell, Megadeth kind of fits in this game, then this is really interesting. But I'm warning you, The gameplay is extremely repetitive, extremely simplistic, extremely boring. You will spend countless hours doing the same shit, fighting the same repetitive enemies, doing the same trivial combat over and over and over. Then you'll also spend hours rolling around, trying to get your limbs back, doing stupid quick time events against babies so you don't die, and having to reload checkpoints. There's going to be parts of the game that are extremely frustrating, where you don't know what you're supposed to be doing because the tutorial dips are awful, and the gameplay execution is shit. So really, if you want my opinion, NeverDead will probably, first of all, I can't recommend anyone buy this game. This is a rental, because the game's length, the campaign, is just over 8 hours. Now keep in mind, I had some frustrating parts where I kept dying, so if you don't keep dying like I did, it's probably shorter than 8 hours, but you'll get about 8 hours of gameplay out of the single-player campaign. Chances are, if you try to play this game now, you won't find anyone for multiplayer, so I can't even say that adds anything to the game. Art design, story, graphics, I'd probably give it an 8. It's interesting. It's fun. Gameplay, I give it a fucking 2. The gameplay is barely gameplay. It would be a 0 if it were like horrible gameplay that you couldn't actually beat, the game were broken. It would be a 1 if it weren't at least having some redeemable qualities. Like I said, there is some redeemable things with the puzzles, but for the most part, the overall gameplay of this game is balls. So, really, overall, I'm probably going to give NeverDead a 4.5 out of 10, because the art direction was amazing. I really liked the story where they were going, but the gameplay is a fucking horrible task, a chore. The game falls flat on its face. It's annoying, it's frustrating, it's badly programmed, and it's shit. The game is just, it's actually below an average game, because even the average games can seem to get right tutorial tips and stuff like that. This game can't even get the basics right. 4.5. Fuck you game designers who fucked up the gameplay of this game. I feel bad for the art director, because the game is a really good idea and the execution is piss poor. Fuck NeverDead. Horrible. Just horrible. And it left a bad taste in my mouth, and I can't wait to get on and move on to other stuff. So I told ya, maximum truth, minimum editing. Alright, so that's it for this edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series. I hope it was informative. I hope now you know whether or not you want to try NeverDead. At most, I say weekend rental, just for to play through and get the story and that interesting elements out of it. But that's about it. And I will do this for most of the major releases that I play this year. So please check it out, and I will see you later for more gameplay and on the next edition of the Hateful Truth. Thanks.